Okay, Chris, thank you very much. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate all that. So we'll start talking a little bit more about optimizing the equipment. So John's going to talk about the pickup heads, and then we'll move on to some optimization stuff. So go ahead, John.
Okay, thank you. So what we have in front of us here is a 790 CP header. This is a New Holland pickup head.
I can read most of them off. Just
this model that's in front of us here, it's a 15-foot model, which means it's 15 feet actually on the pickup belt. In the past, previous headers, like the one to my right over here, we called this one a 16-foot header, but it was 16 feet to the wheels. So that was actually only about 12.5 feet on the belts itself. So we call this a 15, we called that one a 16, but this is actually a bigger header. So, but we actually call this a 15 because I think it's 14 feet, 9 inches or something on the belt. So overall to the outside of the wheels, it's closer to almost 18.5 feet or something like that. So just not to be confused by that from previous generation headers to this one. So, okay, so 15-foot pickup belt, there's 3 belts on there. We've gone from having 7 or 8 belts in the past down to 3, and what that does is it cuts down the amount of gaps that we have between the belts and places to lose seeds through the belts. So right here we've only got the 2 versus 7 or 8 on our previous heads. So much improved over our older heads. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk over to the header here. We're going to start pointing out a few things here. Starting at the front here, I've already talked about the belts themselves. Just to finish on adjusting them, first of all, the picking height to the ground. The picking height of these actual fingers to the ground in here, this area in here, is adjusted on the wheels. This has the fixed wheel on it. It's done by just loosening a bolt on the side, and the wheel itself will pivot up and down. And that will adjust the picking height on the wheels. Now you really only have about 1 inch in there that you can adjust. If you find that you've got the wheels all the way down and you still want more picking height underneath the fingers, what you can do with this style is you take the whole wheel assembly off, take it off both sides and swap them around. And that'll give you a little bit more room underneath the fingers here. The second style of wheel that would go on here, and we don't have one here, but it's the castering wheel. So the castering wheel has an arm that sticks out with an actual wheel that will caster around. That one, same thing. You can adjust the height on that one by adjusting the axle on the wheel itself up and down to adjust the finger height. Same story with that one. If we need more than what that adjustment allows, there is kind of a little trick we can do. Now, I don't have one here to show you, but on that style of wheel, there is a spring that sits on top of the spindle, or not the spindle, sorry, the kingpin. What you do is you take that apart and you put the spring underneath, and it'll give you, I don't know, another couple of inches under there. And it will pick that right up. And then you can use the wheels again to actually lower it back down to the height that you want. So there's lots of adjustability in those things, okay? Last thing with the belts is the tension on them. You adjust the tensions on the ends. There's draw bolts on there to adjust the tension. Now, all that does is adjust the tension on the end. In the center, if you need to adjust the center belt, the way to do it is you'll have to actually take the belt apart. And the rollers themselves, now I said this is a 15-foot pickup. The roller is not 15 feet long. It's actually cut in half. In the very center in there, there's 2 bearings in there on pillow blocks. What you would do is you'd have to take the center belt apart if you find it slipping, and you can actually just put washers underneath the bolts or underneath the bearings, and it'll shim that up. And you just put the belt back together if you need to adjust the center. Same story for the draper belt in behind, for the transition to the deck. Okay. On the wind guard here, we got 2 sets of fingers. We've got the straight ones and then we've got the curved ones. Let the camera in here. So we've got straight ones and we've got the curved ones. The curved ones are actually for short crops, grass seeds, short barley, things like that. If we don't need them, we got a big bushy crop of canola, they actually kind of get in the way, but all we have to do with these is just push them up, and give them a little squeeze, and they lock out of the way like that. So then they're right out of the way. And it's very easy to do that with all of them. Okay, so that's what those are about. The straight fingers are actually a fiberglass finger now. So if they happen to break off, they will just disintegrate in the combine. They won't get wrapped up around a rotor or something like that. Okay, so that's the actual pickup part of this head. Now I'm going to walk around the back here. So on our auger here, there's some adjustments that need to be made, or checked I should say, to the combine. The first thing that I'll mention here is we go back to kind of the beginning when we had the discussion about the feeder house. I'd mentioned that there is 3 different widths of feeder house. Now what we can do is we got to make sure that the pickup is set to your feeder house. Now the way you do that is you come around the back side here. If you guys want to come around here. We have these black plates that sit down in here, and they can be added or removed to match the opening on your feeder house. Now the way to tell, to try and figure out how do you set this up, how do I know what is needed? There is a nice decal here on the back side of the header with all the information you need with measurements on it. So here's the 3 feeder houses I was talking about. We have the CR with a 40-inch feeder house, CR with a 50-inch feeder house, and our CX combine. And then all the measurements that you would need there, and then a nice sticker or a nice picture here to kind of illustrate it. Now, this setup that I'm talking about right here doesn't just apply to a pickup header. It actually applies to all headers and all makes. So we want to make sure that that opening matches our feeder house. Now the other things that they talk about on there one of the main things that they talk about on that sticker is actually the position of these flightings on here too. There's pieces in the center here that can be added or removed. And they kind of follow the same story. They need to match the opening on the feeder house to feed the chain in the feeder house correctly. And the same story goes with those. Just match them up with your feeder house on the decal on the header. Okay, the last thing that I want to talk about on the auger here before we move on, and it doesn't talk about it on the picture there, is the fingers themselves. Now, one update that we did here a couple years ago is we went away from the plastic guides in here. We went to this steel ball and socket design in here. So it's a lot more robust and doesn't wear out like the plastic ones used to. There it is there. So we actually want to talk about the timing of these fingers too. So when I talk about timing, what I'm referring to is where the fingers are fully out and fully in. There is actually a timing procedure to these. And the timing that I'm going to tell you is the initial start point that I'd like you to work with is what I call 8 o'clock. So if you imagine the tube of the rotor as a clock, you want to see 8 o'clock, the fingers fully retracted. So on the back side here, this finger here is kind of approximately in that position. And you can see it sucked all the way in, and then it starts to come out again. That's a good starting point. That's kind of where I'd like to see it on a normal year. That's where you would probably want it. Now, to make that adjustment, there's an adjuster on the end here. We'll just go down here and we'll open the shield. This mechanism right here would adjust the timing of those fingers. All you'd have to do is you loosen off these 4 bolts here, and then you just put a wrench on the shaft, and you just twist it back and forth until you get the timing that you need. On some older headers, This tends to be a kind of an issue on older machines. You can actually get to a place where you can hit the end of the slot and still not have the timing you're looking for. What has happened is this hub was put on the shaft incorrectly. There's no master spline on here, and it can get put on in the wrong spot. So what you have to do then is you have to remove this bolt, remove these bolts, take the whole mechanism off, move over one spline, put it back together. Okay. And then you should be able to adjust the timing that you're looking for. Okay. On the drive shaft area, this is our drive shaft that you would hook up to the feeder house. This would drive the auger on the header. Inside here is our slip clutch. Now, a few years ago, we updated the slip clutch from a rotary pin type clutch to now this is a friction disc set up in here. Not a bad idea to burnish this. I don't have it apart to show you what it looks. Just imagine a slip disc type of a setup with bolts through it. So all you'd have to do is just loosen the bolts off, slip it, and then do them back up again. I would recommend just loosening off one turn, slip it, and then do them back up again to burnish it and make sure that it's working correctly. Hydraulic hookup, electrical hookup. This gauge right here, this is our flotation system for our pickup belts. It's tied into an accumulator. There's no springs on there. We use hydraulics with an accumulator for the spring system for the pickup. This is adjustable from the cab. It's done through the multifunction handle on the combine. Okay, and that's basically the pickup header in a nutshell.